If you're feeling right now an unmistakable pull towards something, almost like it's magnetic, it's electromagnetic, it's a feeling that something is about to burst right through, almost like a sense of being tested with Herculean tasks, tasks that seem so much bigger than what you can cope with, then you are absolutely right on track for this full moon in Gemini that's happening today on the 4th of December 2025. Now, it sounds a bit dramatic, doesn't it? And you're probably wondering why I'm saying it like that, but all will be revealed. What I want to do in this video is to sort of like deep dive into the whole idea of what this full moon represents. It's in Gemini, it's the 13 degrees. With a full moon, it's always where the moon is in exact opposition to the sun, the position of the sun. So we've got the moon at 13 degrees Gemini, we've got the sun at 13 degrees Sagittarius. But we've also got the North Node and the South Node, both at 13 degrees across the polarity between Pisces and Virgo. All four of those signs, so Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, they're all mutable signs. And so this is forming what looks like a grand square. This is absolutely a time where we're going to feel like, those old medieval torture devices where we felt like really stretched out across the rack, the arms and legs. It's akin to that, but there's some real goodness in this as well. So in this forecast, what I'm going to do is explore the planetary picture, what are the planets doing, but also give you some asteroid intel. In fact, not just the asteroids, I'm also involving anything that is part of this picture. And we've got the Great Attractor, which is a huge place of concentrated, powerful, intense attraction that is pulling galaxies in our case, our Milky Way is being pulled slowly towards it. So, the Great Attractor is part of this whole makeup. We've also got the trans-Neptunian object Orcus. So Orcus is also involved in this particular full moon. And we've got Iris, the goddess of the rainbow. We've got Hercules. In fact, it's been great actually seeing these two asteroids. Has reminded me of one of my first books I ever got, The Mythic Tarot, by Juliet Sharman Burke, and also Astrology Liz Green. And what I really like about this book is, it's got all the mythic tales in. That's why I love asteroids so much, because Hercules and Iris are actually in here. They're next to each other as well, funnily enough. So I'm going to be diving into those messages. I'll also be looking at the Sabian symbols, which also carry so much wisdom within them. So you'll get a real sense of what's going on, and also what you might choose to focus on come the time. We're in the run up to it. It's not happening just yet. It's happening in about 12 hours time. Most likely, especially if you're an empath, which I'm guessing you are if you're listening to Feel Good Astrology. If you're an empath, you've probably already been tuning into it. I know last night, all of a sudden, I had this mad burst of rage that came through me, at something seeming very, very unfair. It took me right back to childhood. And I didn't sort of explode, but I felt it build up inside me. And I was very fortunate enough to be able to talk it out with somebody. So most likely, you've been feeling this. Now, in this video, I'm going to be examining, what, the energy of Gemini and Sagittarius are. So it's going to go pretty deep. And throughout this, I'm going to litter it with loads of little questions that you might find helpful, to help sort of focus you on the task at hand. I always think that full moons and new moons, they're really going together. If you look at one without the other, you're really missing the picture. But this is absolutely clearing the way for the massive new moon at the end of the year on the 20th of December, which just happens to be my birthday, by the way. Anyway, the 20th of December, we've got this new moon. Oh my God. And it's in a conjunction with the Galactic Center. So we've got two very galactic connections with these two moons. Now, this often happens at this time of year because obviously we have a full moon and a new moon, but they are right slap bang on the moons. So this is one hell of a month of big shifts. So let's get going. If you're new to this channel, by the way, my name is Louisa. I love to examine planets, and really see, what the wisdom of the planets is showing us. That's my real thing that I'm really hot on. So what I'm going to do is look at the planetary picture first of all. These are the most obvious things that are coming up. Then have a look at the Sabian symbols and the asteroids, and the story of the of this whole experience, I think, will just really bear out. Anyway, thanks for joining me, by the way. So the first thing I noticed with this full moon, I've already mentioned it. So here's the moon. This chart, by the way, is set up at the exact time of the full moon from a UK perspective, not just because I'm British, but because I actually live in the British time zone. I'm actually in Portugal, but we follow the exact same time as London, and London is the midpoint. It's a universal time zone, so that's why I've set the charts for this particular time zone. So yeah, this is how it looks. So you can see the moon here in Gemini, and like I said, exactly opposite, you've got the sun. Now you can see Mars and Venus are close by. They're not so close that they get burnt up by the sun, which is nice. Venus almost, but there's a nice little bit of distance there, and then you'll see exactly or very close to exact. I mean, they're all at 13 degrees, but you've got the north node here in Pisces and the south node here in the sign of Virgo. So the first thing I would say is, if you have your any of your angles, and that would be your ascendant, descendant, your IC, your MC. If you've got any of your angles or all of your angles through the mutable signs, these are the mutable signs: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. This full moon is likely to really set things in motion. This would be a month where motion starts to really flow in your life. If you've got your sun in Sagittarius, or like your sun, your moon, or your ascendant in Sagittarius or Gemini, again, you're going to be really feeling this. Then my last thing I would say is, if you've got any planets around, say, 5 to 20 degrees of all of these signs, but in particular Gemini and Sagittarius, again, you're going to be really, really feeling this kind of energy. This is really big shifting energy. So this particular full moon, now with a full moon, the sun is always showing us what we're shining and what we're emitting, and the moon is always showing what is being received and reflected. And so I always think full moons are a bit like watching things through a projector. So you've got something small and it gets blown up big on the screen opposite. And what you're seeing on the wall isn't actually real. You could put your hand on the wall and you'll see your hand amongst the picture that's being projected. So, what the moon is showing us isn't necessarily real. It's what's being, perceived through our senses and through our current stage of knowledge. But they always go hand in hand. There's something that we're emitting and then something that we see, on the wall. Now, that wall could be in your partner. It could be reflected to you in your clients, in your best friend. It could be reflected back to you by things that are happening in your life. And so often we think, oh, that thing's come in and it's their fault. But with this full moon, I often think, what we can't see in ourselves, through no fault of our own necessarily, because we're not trained to see that in ourselves. We're trained to, from word go, to blame outwards. I think that's how Western society goes. We're always taught that things are outside of us and not created from ourselves. But what's going on with the full moon is it's really showing what is taking place inside us that we can't yet see is inside us. And so other people are showing us that, they are co-creating our reality for us. So yeah, it's pretty big. And you might be shown things that you were really unconscious to, most likely, because the moon really shows us, if the sun is showing us what we're consciously aware of, the moon is showing us what we're really unconscious to in terms of our awareness. And it can show us our intuition and the sort of intuitive language that comes up that we can get to understand. Now, at the time of the full moon, these are poles apart. They were completely in opposition, and so we see this picture so clearly. It comes sharply into focus. And of course, when you also add in the fact that Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign. It's very expansive. It's ruled by Jupiter. It's all about faith and belief systems and philosophy, and sort of like taking off the meaning of things with great gusto. The sign of Sagittarius is a real sort of questing sign, full of warmth and optimism, and really wants to get the big picture. Well, Gemini, is also about information, but it's a lot more nitty gritty. It's ruled by Mercury. And so, the mercurial picture is a lot more about facts and things that are known and things that everybody agrees on. So it's like possibly the smaller truth, or the black and white truth, the left and right, up and down, in and out. Whereas Sagittarius is kind of very contextual. It's a huge big thing, and it's a story. So you learn about the big pictures, and you learn your own truth within the story. Whereas Mercury and Gemini, that sort of energy, is really wanting to show you the detail and the actual truth. And so this, like these two signs are absolutely about the revelation of information. And so with the sun and the moon, the finite truth is coming out from your big story, you could say. And so we're going to get a real glimpse of something, like a real moment of clarity. Like I said at the start, I had a kind of blowing up in me last night. I felt this truth suddenly get very, very clear. I got very annoyed about something. And in my annoyance, I was tapping to my husband, who's in another room. And we were just like communicating. I was kind of half working, doing charts and things. And we were tapping to each other a message, and we later chatted about it, in real life. Not like, isn't it weird how people can do that? They tap messages to each other in the same house. Can't believe I've even admitted that. But anyway, and I'm guessing it's not just me. I hope not. Anyway, but in the tapping of it and seeing what I was writing to myself, I was like, man, you're really pissed. You're like really, really pissed off. And actually, sometimes we have to come into that really strong emotion to really see what's coming out. I don't think I'd ever voiced what I'd voiced. And it wasn't to my husband. It was, he was observing what I was writing about, something I'd seen. And this unmistakable, real big gripe came out. And it was, I think, a truth I never spoke in my childhood, that all of a sudden it really came out and it needed to be heard. A part of me that I didn't stand for in the past, suddenly that side of me absolutely wanted to be stood up for. And so I do think these full moons give us access to a power that maybe we haven't quite fully understood exists within us. And then boom, there it is. And we don't often know what to do with it. But like I say, it's a huge game of patience, observation, and being ready to untangle it and use compassion with yourself. Now, if we also add in the nodes, so the south node and the north node, they're not actual things. They're astrological positions. They're sort of calculated. It's to do with different cycles, and I've spoken about this in different videos. But the south node is showing us what we've already learned, what we've already kind of got under our belt. It can show us, where we've come from in terms of previous lives. But mostly, I think it shows us where we're really easy about something, like where we've already gained competence. And so, if we were to rest on our laurels, we'd be most likely resting on our south node. And yet our north node is really showing us what we still struggle with and what we're really still working with it. And if you find your north node in your birth chart, you'll probably realize that's an area of life that you really spend a lot of time in. I know I do in mine. My north node is where all the action takes place in my birth chart. And funnily enough, this is right over my north node, like the sun and Venus right now is just either side of my north node. So this is absolutely pinging on my chart. But the north node here is showing what we're collectively working with. And so, because we're in this polarity, interestingly, the south node and the moon are both ruled by Mercury. They're signs ruled by Mercury, Virgo and Gemini. And then the north node and the sun, they're both in signs ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and he's one of the rulers of Pisces. And so again, we've got this real kind of polarity between the mercurial way of thinking things through, which is factual, and it's quick information, short little bits of contextual information that fit together to build up a picture. Whereas, Pisces here, and also Sagittarius, it's about the big philosophical view from a Sagittarius perspective and the spiritual view from the Piscean perspective. Both of them are really not boundaried signs. They are wide open. And so, this North Node here is showing what we're struggling about in terms of our spiritual expansion. So when we look at this, then we're also asking ourselves, what is the moon going to show us about our spiritual expansion? What finite clarity is going to come out of our kind of big philosophical baggy story about our life? And what does that mean about our spiritual acceptance? Because we've already got a really good grounding in this Virgo energy, so we're kind of moving away from what is known and what we've all agreed upon, like, oh yeah, that's the truth. And this is what normal society looks like, and this is a normal life. And yet we're moving over here because we're moving into a much deeper spiritual context. And with a spiritual context, is there a right and wrong? Probably not. Do right and wrong even exist in a spiritual context? Who knows? It's huge. And then we've also got a grand water trine. Now, I do want to just kind of honor this grand water trine, but also gently move away from it, because we're coming to the end of it, currently. And I quite like this aspect of it. We've got Jupiter and Mercury, the two planets in question, that are ruling all four of these signs. They're in a lovely trine at the moment. And so that came in and it kind of faded out, and Mercury went retrograde and it's come back in again. But Jupiter right now is in a trine with Saturn and Neptune, and it has been for a time. And then in this last season, we've had Mars, the Sun, and Venus all come into this third point here. And obviously the moon comes into this third point here every month. And then Mercury's here. Now, this is the last planet. After, I think, the 11th of December, Mercury is going to be exactly in a trine with Neptune, and then it's going to be moving out of that pattern altogether. So we're also integrating the last of this grand water trine energy. And so this is the flow of feeling. If you think of the water signs, they're all about emotion, psyche, the wealth of feeling and the movement of feeling. Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer. He is absolutely bringing back this beautiful, magnificent feeling of family connection and loyalty and ancestry, and the need to feel stable with people around you. I love this. He's really sort of, I think, welcomed in the family ethic, reintroduced it, actually. And then Saturn and Neptune, well, they've actually been in Pisces for quite a while. I mean, Neptune's been here since 2018, was it? So it's a long time. It's longer than that, isn't it? But they're coming to the end of their journey in the sign of Pisces. This is, it's not 2018. It's way before then. Hang on one sec. I need to get that date now. One sec. My apologies. Neptune's been in the sign of Pisces since 2011. So Neptune's been coming through this for quite some time. I really see him actually really helping the whole idea of social media come in, because Neptune is all about kind of salacious news, the sort of connections that have no beginning and no end. And it's a little bit celebrity. It's a little bit, deceptive and performative. And of course, everyone's got used to taking photos and showing their nice smiles rather than what they all look like all the time. And through Pisces, it's such a performance. And Neptune is coming to the end of his time in Pisces. And so we've learned a lot about our emotions and our self-esteem, through social media. And these planets here coming through Scorpio is really shown us where we've had greater levels of strength to deal with our emotions. So I think this has been particularly healing. And there's a really strong healing component to this full moon. Whatever is arising right now is part of a toolkit of healing for yourself. So, you know, it would be very helpful if you could really tune in and work out and say, okay, what truth am I speaking now? Where am I honoring myself fully now? So you can really heal yourself with a sense of tenderness and honoring yourself, which I think is really important. And I'm using a lot of these words because I had an amazing session with my coach on Monday, and I've got a load of notes. He's great. Well done. Thank you, Lonnie. And then we've also got this ongoing T-square, which will fade out at the end of the year, and it will come back in, in 2025 in a slightly different way. But currently we've got Jupiter in opposition to Pluto. These are two superpowers. Like, Pluto is the ultimate in terms of, the ruler, the divine ruler, or the overall ruler. I mean, if you think of death, like Pluto is sometimes thought of, he's also known as Hades. By the way, he also comes up in this book. But Pluto is absolutely all about, like, it ends with him. He has the final power. He has the final say. So he's the god of the underworld, and he's working in opposition to Jupiter, who is the god of the sky. So you've got, like, below the world, and you've got, like, above world level and in the sky. And Jupiter, I think, is a great visionary. He shows the vision. He might not be so much of a details guy, but he is absolutely full of hope and optimism. And Pluto and Jupiter are in a bit of a battle right now. And what exists between them is Chiron, the wounded healer, but also the coach. So what we have been struggling to heal in ourselves, we are becoming proficient at coaching in. We are becoming our own coach. We can heal ourselves. Physician, heal thyself. I mean, Chiron did heal himself. It killed him in the process, but he healed himself of the wound that he sustained. And so, there's a very, very strong healing component, is what I'm saying. We've got from the water, which is showing us where we can have empathy, compassion, and forgiveness for ourselves. And Pluto, Jupiter, and Chiron, where we start breaking down the superpowers within our own persona. So that side of you that says it's always like this, that Pluto, that divine ruler that absolutely wants you to do this. And if it doesn't go like this, it's an absolute failure. That's Pluto speaking. We need to surrender to Pluto, because, when he takes center stage, we forget all rhyme and reason. We terrorize ourselves. And Jupiter, is selling us a beautiful vision. And, sometimes we catch the vision, but we lack the skills and the energy to perform it. And so it's almost like a cruelty sometimes to see the big vision of what we can't achieve. So yeah, there's loads going on. We've also got this very sweet Neptune and Uranus sextile, which is absolutely a generational energy. The last time these were in a series of sextiles was back in the 60s. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact dates. The last time before that they came together, the last time they were in an aspect together was in 1993, when the two of them were in a conjunction. So they rarely come into aspect, but when they do, they are really setting the scenes for something big and generational going on. So we are going through this big generational shift. And of course, like all shifts, we're all doing our own part of it. Nobody's not part of the collective human shift. We all play our little part, and all of our little parts add up into what is going on as part of a much, much bigger thing. And, Uranus is our channeled awareness, that awareness that we absolutely just comes in lightning fast, like you can't miss it, slaps us right slaps us right in front, in between our eyes. Whereas Neptune, it's kind of a feeling, a knowing. It's much quieter, and it's really hard to shake off. It's a bit like a fog. And then the final thing that is also really playing into these times as well is we've got Mercury applying into the final opposition with Uranus. So in the same way that we've had these grand water trines all season, we've also had Mars, the Sun, and Venus in an opposition to Uranus. Mercury went into an opposition with Uranus, then backed out. They both went retrograde at the same time. And now Mercury is coming in for his third and final opposition with Uranus. It's coming in for landing, and that takes place again next week on the 11th of December. But it's giving us a lot of knowledge. Mercury is very much about our physical and earthbound mentality. Uranus is like our cosmic mentality. And so we are bouncing between the two of those. We're making sense of what is known here and also what is known up here, which is kind of not that dissimilar to, the split at the moment between this Gemini moon and the Sagittarius sun. So we've got a lot of different themes going on at the same time. Now, if we ever look from the term of or the side of Sabian symbols, and by the way, if you haven't seen Sabian symbols, I adore them and I find them so useful. They really, sometimes if you're trying to crack open a chart and there's just something you've got a little bit of, I wonder if there's a deeper meaning to this. If you look at the degree of something important in your chart, like for instance, your midheaven, and you're really wondering for an extra little seed of information about your future career, looking at the degree of your midheaven or your ascendant, for instance, your sun, it gives you so much more information. There's 360 different meanings. Now, with these Sabian symbols, they were channeled over 100 years ago, and they've been reinterpreted by different astrologers and healers and stuff. And I really like Linda Hill's. They're highly accessible, really easy to find. You go to www.sabiansymbols.com, an amazing website. They're all there on display. It's also worth buying her book if you just want them in case for some reason the internet goes down. You've got them there to flick through. I've looked up the Sabian symbol for the full moon in Gemini, and they always get rounded up to the next number because obviously it's not 13 degrees, it's 13 degrees 04. So it gets rounded up. And here's the meaning. So this is the meaning for the moon that's giving us the inspiration and that clarity. Two people at widely different points are in conversation with each other by means of telepathy. This symbol speaks of psychic and clairvoyant communication with others and the ability to be able to pick up on what others are thinking. You can communicate with someone, and it's not always necessary to be physically face-to-face or on the phone or emailing them or the like, or even messaging on Messenger last night. You can have bonds with people that are unaffected by distance or actually being in touch with each other. Perhaps your heart is telling you that you're always in their company and there's no need to feel alone. Keeping others in your mind and heart will communicate something to them, and probably they back to you. Conquering space and time limitations, psychic and mental communication, sharing ideas, the other person knowing what is felt or thought, being on the same frequency, 5D communication. I love that. And it's so funny because, the full moon in Gemini would appear to be so much more rational. That it's about that sort of black and white foundational knowledge that everybody can agree on, that, where people say, oh, this is how it is, and I don't like to talk so much about specific politics, but there are times that I've noticed where everybody has suddenly agreed with something and people say, science says this, and all of a sudden it's like a load of dominoes falling. All of a sudden everyone falls into alignment with that scientific view, which later might be debunked and you realize it was a load of BS, because science is only as good as its starting point and also the people conducting that science. But of course, a lot of news is supported by science and sponsored by science. And so, you often get this kind of sweeping generalization where all of a sudden everyone is falling like dominoes. Everyone goes into the alignment of the scientific view. And that's a real sort of Gemini thing, like that sudden modern popular sway. Whew, there it is. It's gone. Hello over there. Everyone falls into that alignment because they're holding it on the concept of it's science. Whereas the Sagittarius is like asking questions, wanting to, hang on a second, I'm not just going to accept that it's science. Therefore, I want to know the sort of background. I want to know the detail. And so it's interesting that this Gemini Sabian symbol for this full moon, even though it has that feeling that it could be a popular idea, and it could be backed by something, that we might have this sudden clarity that is so clear you can't ignore it. It's also like the clarity that psychic energy exists, the clarity that telepathy is a real thing, the clarity that we are all connected because we relate to each other, or because, you know, we are all part of the same field of conscious awareness. Who knows? But I love the fact that this is about conquering space and time limitations, you know, psychic and mental communication, the sharing of ideas, that we're all sort of, you know, connected. And I always think that this last sentence in the Sabian Symbols website always points out what goes wrong if the energy goes too far one way. And so it's saying blocking out psychic awareness because of fear, manipulating others by subtle means, mind and thought control, feeling very separated by time and space. That's when this energy doesn't go down quite so well. But there's a lot of potential at this time of the full moon to come into a psychic knowing. Now, obviously, a full moon, it's not just the moon, the sun's involved. So let's also have a look at the Sabian symbol for the sun in Sagittarius at 13 degrees, which equals 14 degrees in terms of the Sabian symbol. And so this is also interesting as well. A vast panorama of sand and time is unfolding. Oh my goodness, like a collapse of time and space. The pyramids and the Sphinx in their glory rise before the eye. This degree shows the power and strength of history and grandeur, along with issues to do with spiritual mysteries and intellectual records, and the building of grand monuments and empires. An interest in ancient civilizations often comes with this degree, and there may be the desire or need to establish some type of monument, or perhaps work at it or worship it. You may be working at building an empire, yours or another's, as this is often as this often implies pyramid selling. Oh, that's interesting. And large economic structures. You may need a tour guide and a map, and the determination to build things in exact measurements. Power of the past coming through, spiritual ancestry, big business and enterprises, predictions, profits, the desire to build a personal edifice, ancient languages, lost cities. And then, you know, at the worst end of this, we've got slave labor, looting, enormity of big business, great treasures robbed by the greedy, monuments that belittle others, having a know-it-all attitude, rich versus poor. So, yeah, I mean, that negative side is awful. But I love the fact that this is also giving us access to the power and strength of history and grandeur and the mysteries and the intellectual records. So to me, this is saying we can tap into the past and learn from the past, and the glory of the past can rise before our eyes, you know, that we can get to see things. And from that, we can know what we're building together, or what we might be building ourselves in our life. And so maybe at the time of this full moon, we're clearly seeing that we're connected. And at the same time, we realize we've got our own part to play in building our own type of monument, although that sounds really odd, but like our own legacy. Maybe we're all building part of a solution or part of an answer. We're playing our part, I guess, is what I really notice about this. So I wonder how that fits in with you. Like, what are you experiencing right now? But that's not all, because if we also have a look at the asteroids and other stuff, not just asteroids, we've got the Great Attractor. Now, I need to put a shout out for my good friend Trassa. And you might know her channel. She's got a channel called Goddess Inspire. And so Trassa, she looks at galactic astrology, and I've had a reading with her and it was really amazing. And so she'll look at your birth chart and she will say, ooh, I see, I see your birth chart is aligned over here. Oh, that's aligned to Antares, or, you know, this is aligned over here to the Pleiades. And so she'll be able to unlock your chart from a much more cosmic perspective. And so I'm actually going to be speaking to her next week and doing a show with her, because she wants to talk about 3i Atlas. Now, I don't track 3i Atlas. I've got enough on my plate right now. But, you know, 3i Atlas and everything that's come up with the observation of where it is in our skies right now, and the prediction of where it's going to be. Allegedly, it's going to be at its most visible at the time, the day before the new moon in Sagittarius. And of course, that new moon in Sagittarius is in a conjunction with the galactic center. So yeah, it feels like, from a galactic perspective, whatever 3-eye atlas is here to represent right now in terms of human consciousness, or is it just a coincidence? Who knows? Whatever it is bringing us, it's culminating around the time of this super phenomenal cosmic new moon at the end of Sagittarius. So I'm fascinated by the fact that we've got this sun from this full moon in a conjunction with the great attractor. And I know Trassa from Goddess Inspire. It's worth checking out her channel, because she's probably got something to say about it. I'm sure she's probably said something about it. But the great attractor, it is very much about the unseen forces. It's apparently much bigger than the galaxies. It's this huge gravitational space in whatever this whole universe is. This is pulling in galaxies. It's a concentrated shift of energy that is so unseen and forceful. It is powerful. And so we read it as powerful unseen forces, collective destiny, fate, or major social movements. It's an intense attraction that we almost can't get out of. And so the full moon is working in opposition to this. So something else that I think when I read that is, whatever is taking place at the time of the full moon, the much bigger story of life on Earth, and maybe the life off Earth, the whole story of existence is coming up to be explored. Are we about to have a huge breakthrough in our understanding about the nature of everything? And it occurs to me that what we might be getting some truth about is much more than we can understand from our terrestrial perspective. Something is taking us way back to the source, like completely beyond that. So, I really love that, that the great attractor is right down here, and the moon is up here. Now, we've also got Psyche. Now, goddess Psyche, and the first time I came across Psyche was in this wonderful book. Like I said, the astrologer Liz Green had something to do with this. Actually, Psyche is in here, but I haven't. She's actually in the suit of, if I'm not mistaken, cups. But anyway, those three actually, this Psyche, Iris, and Heracles are all in this book, but I didn't actually find that part with Psyche. But Psyche is a mortal princess who was absolutely gorgeous, more gorgeous than Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love. And Aphrodite got really peed off with her, and so she sent her son Eros to her, trying to get her to fall in love with an ugly beast, so she would be condemned for life, to fall in love with someone really, really hideous. But actually what happened was, she fell in love with Eros, and they fell in love with each other. He fell in love with her, and so it was a real kind of torture for both Psyche and Aphrodite. And in the end, Zeus intervened, and allowed this mortal princess, to become immortal. And so Psyche, she is the goddess of the soul. And so wherever she shows up, she's really showing what our soul is yearning for. I love her. Like, when I look at astrology, sometimes if I'm looking at partnerships, I will pull up the asteroids Psyche and Eros. Eros is talking about what we're really kind of churned up by, what we've got a real kind of erotic energy for, what's a turn on for us. And Psyche is showing what our soul is crying out for in love. She is absolutely the most delicate aspect of love. She is what the soul is yearning for. And so whatever is coming up with this full moon in Gemini, that is also about 5D communication, telepathy, where we're all connecting. This full moon is also connecting into what our soul is yearning for. I mean, that's beautiful, isn't it? I love that. And then we've also got Iris, the goddess of the rainbow, who's definitely in here. I'm just going to read out a small passage, but she is a messenger. She's connecting the sky and also the earth, the ground and the sky via the rainbow. So she's goddess of the rainbow, and in Portuguese, rainbow is arco-iris, iris. And if you're Portuguese and you're listening and I've just completely sabotaged and made your language sound disgusting, I apologize in advance. But iris, iris, the goddess of the rainbow, this is all about having a balanced heart, and a balanced mind. She's about getting the balance between the earth and the godly field. She collects, I've got so many spelling mistakes here. She collects water from the river of Styx, and it is binding us to our oath. So, she would, like people would take water from her cups that she'd be balancing, and they would be bound by their oaths. And allegedly, a god who broke his oath would be rendered speechless for a year. So she had some power, but she is about getting the balance right between the earthly and the godly realm. Let's just quickly see if there's something else in here. This is actually like from this tarot book. On a divinatory level, the appearance of temperance or iris in a spread implies the need for a flow of feeling in relationship. She's the guardian of the rainbow, suggesting potential for harmony and cooperation, resulting in a good relationship or happy marriage. We have to develop a balanced heart, which I love. We've also got Orcus, the trans-Neptunian object. I'm going to go to another one of my books that I've got, and this isn't one I've written because this is Alan Clay's book. Now I've recorded a couple of videos with Alan Clay. He's been brilliant. He's come on to my channel to talk about a couple of trans-Neptunian objects. I am going to do an actual show about this book, in fact, because it's really, really good. But he teaches trans-Neptunian objects online, and so if you're interested in that, it's worth joining his academy. But anyway, of Orcus, he says he's opening us up to karmic consciousness, the awareness that each of our actions has a consequence, and he gives us the ability to see and deal with the consequences of our past actions. He teaches us to align to a spiritual creed and understand the karmic process of life. At the highest level, he gives us the ability to transmute shadow into light. Well, there's some similarity there, isn't there, with Iris? The idea of the transmutation, the idea of the balancing, and the idea of oath. Later on, he says, we make oaths, in myth, Orcus dragged oath breakers into the underworld. Oaths are contracts with the gods, and we call down a conditional curse on ourselves when we break them. So we make oaths both to ourselves and others, while the oaths we make to others are policed and have real world consequences. It's the oaths that we make to ourselves that we can easily fudge the line. So Orcus is reminding us of every oath we've ever taken. Are we fulfilling, our karmic destiny? What did we sign up for? How are we doing with that? And so it's interesting that Iris and Orcus are both speaking about us being bound to an oath. And it's interesting that they're both in a conjunction with the South Node, showing that these are oaths or karmic ideas from the past, from past lives. And, maybe we've already worked a lot on them, but we mustn't forget about them. And of course, we mustn't forget about them in what we're about to achieve with this North Node, because the North Node is also in a conjunction with Heracles. And Heracles in this book is representing the tarot card of strength. Heracles was born of a mortal woman with Zeus, and Zeus's wife Hera got really upset. I mean, in mythology, she is super jealous, like really jealous, and she puts terrible curses on Zeus's offspring with other women. It's not their fault. And so Heracles, he was sorely tested by Hera. She absolutely, she gave him the 12 labors that he had to endure. He had to get the Nemean lion's pelt and all these different things. And he was driven mad with these very, very difficult tasks that were seen to be impossible. But of course, he had some of Zeus's strength. He had some of his godliness here. And so here, this is talking about us our creative handling of our own rage. Heracles he's known as like the strongest man. He has superhuman strength. And so he's able to attend to these 12 labors, although they pretty much almost kill him. Like, he's being sorely tested, not because he deserved to be, but because of Zeus having it away with his mortal mum. In the end, he is rewarded, so Zeus, I think, helps him, and he splits him from his human self. And so his human self dies, but his godly self rises and ascends to Mount Olympus. So he becomes a fully fledged god. So Heracles does, become himself through his challenges. And of course, that really speaks of the North Node. I'm not suggesting that you've got 12 labors at the moment. However, the North Node is often showing us what we really struggle with in life, where we, through no fault of our own, through being born at this time, born into this world with the kind of rules and regulations around us that we perceive, and also that we feel like we're told we have to do, and we have no choice but to get a digital ID, or whatever it is that different governments are suggesting. Anywhere where we feel like we should be sovereign, the North Node might be showing us what we've been born into and what we have to survive or move beyond. And so Heracles here is suggesting that we might be driven mad by these labors, and we're being sorely tested, but actually it's bringing out the absolute best in us, believe it or not. And that part of us that was kind of doomed to experience this is going to die away, but that superhuman, that godly part of us is going to come out. It's going to emerge. So when we piece all of this together, what I'm really getting here is that this full moon is going to bring us into the full clarity of what we're doing here, and also how we can connect with that side of us that is helping us ascend into who we're meant to be. So it's huge. I can't underestimate the power of this beautiful full moon, with its opposition, almost exact opposition to the great Attractor, its lovely conjunction to Psyche, the Sabian symbol, all of that jazz. It's huge, really, really important. So I don't know what you make that mean in your own life, and how you're going to use this information or this energy. But to me, this feels really important. I think whenever we have a full moon or a new moon, that degree, wherever it shows up in our astrology, is really important for the next 2 weeks until the new moon comes or the next full moon comes. But it's also a really important point for the next month until the next, so like full moon to full moon. So we've got this is unraveling definitely over the next 2 weeks, and this is also unraveling until the next full moon, which is I'm guessing around the 1st or 2nd of January. So it's going to be coming, after Christmas. So yeah, this is a really sort of epic time of the year where this self-realization, this sudden knowing, this sudden illumination is on the cards. And yeah, it's special, it's ancient, and it's intergalactic. So on that bombshell, that's where I'm going to leave this. Now, if you love the way that I'm examining the charts and things, and you want to work with me personally, get in touch. My details are on my channel page and below in the video description. I've also got a membership where I do forecasts, and from January I'm going to be teaching 3 sessions a week, starting right at the start of astrology, sharing everything that I know bit by bit. And you can participate or not. It's entirely up to you. But if you want to sort of get into the flow of how I'm looking at astrology and how I like to share it, then yeah, come join me in my community. It's school.com/feelgoodastrology. And that's school, SKOOL.com. But anyway, whatever you are giving to life and the world right now, it has a part. It really does have a part. We're all playing our part. And that's what I think this full moon is here to show us. Absolutely. So I raise a glass to you. I don't drink, but like if this was a glass, I would be raising a glass to you and how you are dealing with the Herculean labors that you're dealing with right now. Because what you're taking on for the collective is huge. You know, I really am feeling into the sum total of everybody's energy right now, everybody's goodness, everybody's soul's yearning. We're all part of this. So may you feel as important as you really are. So much love to you. Have a great full moon and catch you next time. Thanks for joining me.